as a result. However, the Nigerian Superior Court, through their decisions, have set aside customs and traditions that have inflicted and are designed to inflict hardships on widows and women in general. We have cases like the case of Anekwe versus Inwekwe. We also have other cases that have emphasized the culture or the customary law that is prevalent. And we can't blame some of these Supreme Court judges because they are also part of the culture. So there are some cases that they reiterated the Yoruba customary law. For instance, Shogunro Davies and Shogunro Davies. It was held in this case, in 1929 case, that in Yoruba native law and custom, the intestacy devolution of property follows the blood, and a wife or widow not being of the blood has no claim to any share of his inheritance. Another case, which is the Akinubi case, Akinubi versus Akinubi. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court also emphasized the Yoruba culture that a wife, a widow, cannot inherit from her husband's property and can also not be a co-administratrix of her husband's property. Now, this case is quite pathetic. That's why I'm going to read about it. For instance, this Akinubu case was very pathetic, where the deceased had a house in his hometown, which he leased out to tenants before his death. After his death, his brothers collected rent from the house under the guise that they were entitled to their late brother's property in order to administer the proceeds for their late brother's children. However, no amount was provided for the children's upkeep or even their school fees. Meanwhile, the deceased had 6 children, and his wife, the widow, was hawking bread on the streets of Lagos to generate money to feed the children. Apparently, the amount she realized from this business was not enough to feed and send the children to school. In the light of this situation, it would be repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience for the brothers of the deceased to withhold the inheritance which the widow can use to take care of the children who are heirs to their father's estate. They were doing this on the basis of the Yoruba customary law, which, of course, became repugnant by virtue of the hardship that the widow and the children were going through. There are nevertheless recent decisions of the court setting aside customs and traditions that have inflicted and have resulted in hardship situations for widows and in women in general. We have the case of Mojeku versus Mojeku in the Court of Appeal, which unfortunately was overturned in the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court held that that particular custom was not repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. I would also want to say that at this point, there are other parts of culture, like the bride price. And this bride price is quite controversial, but I will put my own opinion and from what I've seen. Bride price, the payment of a bride price has been said to be suggestive of the perception that women are being objectified as transferable property, where they have no autonomy as to the direction of their marital travails. Therefore, bride price is a form of exchange between the family of a bride and a groom, whereby gifts in cash or in kind are given to the bride's family in return for giving away the bride. The commodification of the woman is an absurdity in the new world of human rights and freedom of persons. Although also we have a dowry. The dowry is normally paid by the family of the woman to the family of the man, while bride price is paid by the man or potential groom to the family of the woman. Therefore, I submit that although both bride price and dowry could also be seen as symbolic, as the two families are joined together through the marriage of their children, it may still be a hindrance to obtaining a paradigm shift of the notion of equality, as the woman is still perceived by the practice as an item or chattel acquired by her new family, particularly in societies where high bride prices are fixed. There are some that once the woman or the young lady is a graduate or a PhD holder, the bride price goes higher, or is rated by the level of education and sophistication of the bride. Then that's why we are still saying that the bride is like a commodity, because they will bargain and between families and say, well, she has a PhD, she has this, she has a car, she has a house, and for that reason the bride price goes higher. Furthermore, the issue of domestic violence violates the right to dignity of the human person. even though the words torture or inhuman and degrading treatment are words used for police torture or beaten up by a stranger. However, where the husband is the culprit and the victim is his wife, it is not usually regarded as a constitutional breach. Using domestic violence, for example, it is my hope that these deterrent provisions must be ingrained in our curriculum, using the enacted laws such as the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015 and other legislation, especially the Constitution, as foundation. However, one of the ways to achieve a paradigm shift is by breaking the culture of silence, where women are not afraid to report the perpetrators, who may be a husband or family member, to the law enforcement agencies, with a corresponding responsible action by law enforcement too. Therefore, equality of men and women can be achieved where there occurs a paradigm shift which can start by speaking out against the injustices. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, another inequality and the source of inequality and discrimination is religion. Sir, gender inequality in most African cultures has been attributed to a number of other factors apart from cultural and traditional beliefs and practices already discussed. The predominant religions of Islam, Christianity, and indigenous religions tend to accord men a higher status in relation to women. Ever since Sharia courts started hearing criminal cases in 2000, they have handed down at least 10 death sentences. Of these, 1 has been carried out, 5 have been overturned on appeal. Those sentenced to death include 4 women and 6 men. The offenses which they have been sentenced to death have included murder, sodomy, and adultery. Women have been disproportionately affected in adultery cases because of different standards of evidence required. For instance, a man facing charges of adultery must have been seen in the act by 4 independent witnesses before he can be convicted, whereas a woman can be found guilty on the basis of pregnancy alone. Therefore, the Islamic Sharia law practiced in the northern states of Nigeria reinforces customs that are unfavorable to women. Other examples are as follows: the flogging of Bariya Magozu, who was convicted for adultery in Zamfara State; the death sentence by stoning passed on Safiya Hussaini Tunga Tudu by Sharia court in Sokoto for adultery with her male partner was allowed to go free when her male partner was allowed to go free. The death sentence passed on Amina Lawal in Funtua for having a child outside wedlock. The death penalty cases which have attracted the most public attention so far have been the cases of the 2 women mentioned above. The sentence to death by stoning for adultery of Safiya and Amina Lawal, both these cases elicited strong international outrage. In both cases, the men alleged to have been involved in the adultery were let off for lack of evidence, illustrating the inequality of men and women before the law and the discrimination against women resulting from the different standards of evidence required. Furthermore, in the Bible, the scribes and the Pharisees wanted to enforce the laws of Moses in the biblical injunction, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." Basically, this law was not for women alone. This instruction is for both men and women. However, the influence of patriarchy fuels religion by applying the punishment for such sinful acts to women alone. In Deuteronomy chapter 17, according to the punishment that should be meted out, the 2 culprits, both the man and the woman, were supposed to be stoned. It is saddening that this practice still continues in some religious sects of stoning the woman and allowing the man to go on a lesser punishment. Jesus taught them equality at that point because the response he gave them was that he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. Hence, this was a statement revealing that a man and a woman are equal before God, and the same punishment for wrongdoing should be meted out to both the man and the woman alike. However, by the fact that the woman is adjudged as of lesser value than men, adherents insist the woman should be punished and the man should be set free to go ahead and do what he seems right in his own eyes. But the woman does not have such privilege nor right. Another biblical instruction which had discriminatory cultural tendencies is where Paul the apostle in the Bible said that women should keep silent in the church. Presently, women do speak in the church, which shows that it was just a culture imposed by religion, but some denominations overtly adhere to this, insisting women could not be ordained pastors. Therefore, religious beliefs are a major hindrance to achieving equality. In addition, from the view of the woman, her belief system is also structured in a manner to believe that she cannot be free to be equal with men. To achieve a paradigm shift, women have to see that they are also human beings just like a man. Another source is sexual harassment and violence. Unfortunately, according to the World Health Organization, sexual violence is any sexual act, attempt to obtain a sexual act, unwanted sexual comments or advances, or acts to traffic or otherwise directed against a person's sexuality using coercion by any person regardless of their relationship to the victim in any setting, including but not limited to home and work. Sexual harassment is more subtle and occurs in different ways. The one I will major on, which happens a lot, is sexual harassment in the workplace and also in institutions of higher learning. The most recent enacted law is the Sexual Harassment in Tertiary Educational Institution Prohibition Act 2016. While Section 3 of the Act creates a fiduciary relationship between an educator and a student, Section 4 thereof defines sexual harassment to include having or demanding sexual relations from a student as a precondition to the giving of a passing grade, grabbing, hugging, pinching, or stroking any body part of a student, whistling or winking at a student's physique. An accused upon conviction is liable to imprisonment for a period of up to 5 years, but not less than 2 years, without an option of fine. Other laws prohibiting sexual harassment and sexual violence include the Lagos State Prohibition Against Domestic Violence Law, the Ekiti State Gender-Based Violence Prohibition Law, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. Now, I want to bring out an American case which is quite apt for what I'm trying to say concerning sexual harassment. There's this American case of the United States and Lanier. It's an example of how a man used his authority as a judge to intimidate and sexually harass a woman. I wouldn't go into the facts, but I want to explain that in the first place, when they took the judge, they sued the woman, or the women sued the judge, and he was convicted or he was prosecuted. During the prosecution, they looked at it as another type of law, maybe domestic or whatever it is. But later on appeal, they discovered that the rights that he violated were constitutional rights. And one of those constitutional rights is the right to human dignity. And for that reason, the judge was convicted. So that was a paradigm shift from looking at sexual harassment as, oh, maybe he's your girlfriend, or maybe because of the way you dressed, or you are the one that enticed him. They stopped looking at it like that. For whatever reason, these women were raped. They were treated in such a manner that violated their constitutional right to human dignity. And that's why he was convicted. I lent that case to the Nigerian authorities as well. But we have also done well in Nigeria. In the case of AGK Maduka and Microsoft Nigeria Limited and 3 others is also an example. This was an example of sexual harassment in the workplace. And the court granted her reliefs, this was the NIC, and held that the termination of the claimant's employment, her employment was terminated because she didn't succumb to the sexual advances by her bosses in the office. And so the court granted her reliefs and held that the termination of the claimant's employment by the first and second respondents through their agents, simply because she refused to succumb to the sexual harassment from the third respondent, the ratification of same by first, second, and third respondents, and the subsequent conduct of the respondents constituted a violation of the claimant's right to human dignity and freedom from discrimination guaranteed under sections 34 and 42 of the 1999 Constitution, Articles 2, 5, 14, 15, and 19 of the African Charter. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I will go on to explaining, because of my time, the reason how we could achieve a paradigm shift in women's rights to participation and decision making. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, a woman's right to political participation is recognized as a fundamental human right in international laws and treaties, as well as in global policy initiatives, such as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. For example, CEDAW provides that state parties shall take all appropriate measures to eliminate discrimination against women in the political and public life of the country, and in particular shall ensure to treat women on equal terms with men, extending to them the right to participate in the formulation of government policy, to hold public office and perform all public functions at all levels of government. My research has revealed the great and grave injustice to us all as human beings in leaving women out of the decision-making process in our society. According to the United Nations Human Development Report, Nigeria was classified as a low development country in respect of equality in educational accessibility. Female adult literacy rates, ages 15 and above for the country, was 59.4%, as against male, 74.4%. The combined gross enrollment for primary, secondary, and tertiary schools for female was 57% and for male, 71%. Consequently, it was affirmed that women are fewer than men in certain socioeconomic activities. According to the report, the percentages of female workers in some selected professions were as follows: architects, 2.4%, quantity surveyors, 3.5%, lawyers or jurists, 25.4%, lecturers, 11.8%, obstetricians and gynecologists, 8.4%, pediatricians, 33.3%, media practitioners, 18.3%. Therefore, these relatively low percentages compared to the men in these professions appears to affect the number of women in governance and positions of authority in diverse professions. Considering women in leadership positions, the Beijing Platform 1995 for Action states that no government can claim to be democratic until women are guaranteed the right to equal representation. Unfortunately, there is a serious issue of gender imbalance in the membership of Nigeria's parliament, which does not reflect the true democracy. The 2023 general elections again delivered low numbers of women in the National Assembly. The representation of women in the present Assembly is not a significant improvement from the previous 9th Assembly. The 10th Assembly, which is the present legislative arm of government, have women occupying 3 out of 109 seats. That's 2.7% in the Senate, and 17 out of 360 seats in the House of Representatives. That's 4.7%, which represents 4.2% of the 469-member assembly. So below is a table. I have a table, I think it will be shown on the screen. But this table shows us the percentages of men and women representation in houses of assembly in Nigeria. Excuse me. Thank you. So there are some states, if we look at some states, is 0% in 2019 and 0% in 2023. No women in the state houses of assembly. Now, how can we have the kind of policies and laws that will protect our women when it's only men that are sitting in the driver's seat? That's what I call it. Similarly, the lack of women in decision-making positions may be one explanation for Nigeria's low investment in sectors that are crucial to human development outcomes, such as health and education. I personally have noticed a few things that have not been regulated that affect women, and even all of us in our society. One of it is the commercial motorcycles that will carry women with 5 children on a bike, all because they are not regulated. And I wish that I was sitting in a decision-making power to be able to make a decision and to be able to regulate the commercial vehicles or the commercial motorcyclists for the protection of the women and the children. Some of the times where you say, okay, there is no accident, yes, thank God for that. But then they are exposed to pollution, assuming a truck is passing with so much smoke, and then those babies or those children will inhale that smoke, and the next thing, the woman is running to the hospital because her children have some chest infection or the other. Furthermore, in the legal profession, after the first female lawyer, Stella Jane Mark, was called to the bar in 1935, it took 12 years before another woman was called, and by 1960, there were only 20 women called to the Nigerian bar. In 1981, Chief Foluke Oluyemisi Abimbola was conferred with the rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria, the first female lawyer to be conferred with this prestigious rank. Women currently represent half of the law students in many schools across the country. According to the 50-50 by 2030 gender report by the International Bar Association and LexisNexis Rule of Law Foundation, women make up 40% of Nigerian lawyers. But the judiciary only accounts for 33% of women in senior roles, with law firms having only 43% of women in senior roles. Only 4 out of the 37 attorneys general in Nigeria are female, and women constitute only 4% of the senior advocates in the entire country. Presently, the fact that there are still discriminatory practices forestalls women from climbing the ladder to positions of authority in their different vocations. We've already discussed some of them. Most importantly is sexual harassment in the workplace. So women will run away from climbing the ladder for such reasons. Such practices, such as early marriage, prevents educating a young girl to the level of higher degrees and expertise in any field, even when the girl has attained qualifications, just as her male counterpart. There are still discriminatory policies and practices in the workplace. Now, numerous treaties in the EU, I just want to give the EU as an example, where they have treaties that promote equality between women and men. The European Institute for Gender Equality has established a number of objectives involving the gender pay gap, female labor market participation, combating gender violence, and promoting equality in decision-making. Growing legislation in the EU also acknowledges that increasing the representation of women in important decision-making roles in both politics and economics is key to achieving gender equality. According to Thomas Chamorro Premuzik, women are better leaders. Women have better people skills, are more altruistic, meaning that they show unselfish concern for the welfare of others. And women are better able to control their impulses. They outperform men in university at graduate and undergraduate levels. An example in Nigeria to confirm this statement. Thank you very much. You may clap for us. An example in Nigeria to confirm this statement is the result of the Nigerian Law School 2018, where 161 candidates obtained a first-class grade comprising of 113 female and 48 male candidates. This shows the potentials that females have even to outperform their male counterparts. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, in addition to ensuring women achieve decision-making positions, affirmative action can be employed, especially in a country like Nigeria. Affirmative action means, among other definitions, positive steps taken to increase the representation of women and minorities in areas of employment, education, and business from which they have been historically excluded. The Nigerian National Gender Policy 2006 seems to acknowledge the fact that there needs to be a change in women's participation in decision-making by stating in the foreword of the document written by the then Minister for Women Affairs, Mrs. Ina Mariam Shiroma, that the National Gender Policy for Nigeria will, among others, contribute towards women's empowerment and the eradication of unequal gender power relations in the workplace and economy, in trade unions, and in broader society. Encourage the participation, support, and cooperation of men in taking shared responsibility for the elimination of sexism and redefining of oppressive gender roles. Increase the participation of women in leadership and decision-making. However, the stereotyping under a patriarchal society may not allow the women to occupy such positions despite the gender policy and despite the improvements in girl-child education in Nigeria. We just noticed that, especially in the legal profession, that a lot of women come out, they become graduates, they become lawyers, but we don't see them in practice. We don't see them as senior advocates of Nigeria. We don't see them on top of the ladder. They kind of stay on the level of the average lawyer or the average woman, or maybe they get involved in domestic activities. We really don't know. That's another research area. Therefore, it is necessary that women who have the qualifications do take the bull by the horn to enter into the political and leadership sphere and help other women to attain leadership roles. For instance, in many African countries, women's participation in civil politics can be said to have relatively increased within the last 2 decades. This observation can be gleaned from several female personalities, such as the first female elected African president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who, despite the restrictions and traditions of her time, rose against all odds to be the president of her country. Very recently, Namibia elected its first female president, President-elect Netombo Nandi-Ndaitwah. An example of this can be seen in Liberia, where following President Sirleaf's election in 2005, Sirleaf appointed several women to high-level posts in her administration, with female ministers initially leading the ministries of finance, law, commerce and industry, gender and development, youth and sports. However, the main goal of affirmative action is for a country to reach its full potential. This occurrence would result in a completely diverse workforce in economic and social sectors, thus broadening the economic base and therefore stimulating economic growth. Therefore, one of the principal means of rectifying gender imbalance is the incorporation of women into leadership positions in Africa's government and civil sectors. What is needed is for women to be an active part of the policy making and design process. Women need to be consulted before development programs are allowed to further marginalize their production roles. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, the following recommendations consist of ways to bring to a reality equality between men and women, as well as non-discrimination. This laudable idea can eventually become a reality. However, the paradigm shift envisaged may not happen immediately. The process of achieving this goal will be more of a marathon than a sprint. Number one, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, is women empowerment. Page 13 of my article published in 2019 states that to be empowered, women must have equal capabilities such as education and health, and equal access to resources and opportunities such as land and employment. What I mean is that we must create an environment, a conducive environment for women to thrive. Don't make things difficult. So don't say you want to meet at 12 midnight or 2 a.m. where you know the woman is nurturing children at home. Make the environment conducive. This includes strengthening opportunities for post-primary education for girls, investing in infrastructure to reduce women and girls' time burdens, guaranteeing women and girls' property and inheritance rights, increasing women's share of seats in national parliaments and local governmental bodies, and combating violence against women and girls. The second recommendation, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, is litigating women's rights as human rights. It is important that women are encouraged to report incidences of abuse or violation of their rights, particularly policies that are clearly discriminatory and which seek to undermine the status of the woman as equal with men in diverse professions and in the workplace. We have several cases, the example of Omolola Olajide and the Nigerian police force, where she got pregnant before marriage and she was dismissed from the police force. But meanwhile, if the man impregnated somebody before marriage, he was not going to be dismissed. But the court held in her favor that was discriminatory. Another case is Federal Republic of Nigeria and Dauda Haladu, where a young girl was raped by a man and she went to report and the courts did the right thing. Another case is Dr. Mrs. Priye Iyala Amadi and Nigerian Immigration Service, where they asked her to get a letter of consent from her husband before she could be issued her passport. And the court said that was discriminatory and was putting her in slavery and servitude. An observation of the above cases reveals that the women involved were prepared to report the matter to the law enforcement agencies to challenge these acts of violence against them, especially sexual assaults, which are usually done in secret. The culture of silence is the only inhibition to litigating women's rights. The cases brought before the courts can only be prosecuted if the victim is ready to testify. Hence, breaking the culture of silence can bring about a paradigm shift of how violation of women's rights are handled. Number 3 is promoting gender equality in the curriculum of primary and secondary schools. Because of my time, I would not go into that, but it's clear. We can change our civic education, social studies, and allow the boys to understand that they are equal with girls. Girls are not subservient to them. They are not less. They are not of less value. They can be trained. They can be taught. Number 4 recommendation is legislative intervention. Yes, we need laws. Laws are the foundation for change. And as long as we have laws, then the judges and the courts can do their job. So bills that will aid in eradicating harmful practices and discriminatory policies against women can be presented to become law. As soon as they are declared a domestic law, then the courts can interpret the laws to protect women's rights. For instance, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Number 5, I've already mentioned, is affirmative action. Number 5, 5th recommendation, as earlier stated, Affirmative action means, among other definitions, positive steps taken to increase the representation of women and minorities in areas of employment, education, and business from which they have been historically excluded. A direct implementation of affirmative action will almost directly eradicate discriminatory policies such as immigration policies, employment policies, and other attempts to prevent women from enjoying their human rights to participation in politics and decision-making. In conclusion, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, the impact of the prevalent African political economy has further undermined African women and encourages inequality. It has occasioned structural inequality. African men are mainly in control of the means of production, while women perform generally menial domestic tasks. It has also been observed that discrimination against women is further exacerbated by the underdevelopment of African economies, which the already dominant male has at his advantage when it comes to competing for jobs or limited resources. There's also the economic factor of division of labor between the sexes. The view has been expressed that efficiency is created through division of labor according to sexes and children are taught at an early age to perform tasks appropriate to their respective sexes. The division of labor becomes a cultural value and remains as part of tradition and culture as long as external influences are kept at minimum. Various beliefs and religions in Africa also provide a basis for status definition, most of them to the advantage of the male. Foreign agents, traders, and missionaries, mostly from the Western world, consciously or unconsciously, introduced their own definitions of their roles of women. To some extent, have contributed to women's loss of status. As a result of these influences, even women themselves speak of their traditional roles as if it were purely domestic and social rather than economic as well. So my recommendation, in conclusion, I would say that a woman's right is a right to be human, just like any other person, and every opportunity, everything that she needs to prosper, to excel, should be given to her. Thank you so much for listening. Acknowledgements. Thank you. Acknowledgements. Acknowledgements, please. Acknowledgements. I wish to first thank. Acknowledgements, please. I wish to first thank. Thank you so much. I wish to first thank the Almighty God, my Father, the Lord Jesus, my Savior, and the Holy Spirit, my guide and my teacher, for this wonderful opportunity that I have been given to stand before you all. It has been God all the way, as He alone preserved me and gave me the wisdom and understanding to write and present this lecture. I sincerely appreciate the management of Leeds City University, Ibadan, especially the Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of Council, Professor Jide Oweye, for providing me the platform to deliver this lecture today and for accepting me to work in the Faculty of Law in the year 2005. I sincerely appreciate the first Vice Chancellor of the Leeds City University and Chairman of the Board of Trustees, Leeds City University, Emeritus Professor J.B. Aladekomo. Thank you, sir, for believing in me and your words of wisdom you shared with me at every opportunity. I also wish to thank the Chancellor, Professor Ogumola, for his fatherly love over the years. I also wish to thank and appreciate the Vice Chancellor of this great citadel of learning, Professor Kabiru Aderemi Adeyemo, who has supported me in too many ways that I can mention. Thank you, sir, for your leadership and mentorship. I appreciate the very pleasant and highly supportive registrar, Dr. Mrs. Oyebola Yeni, who always has a listening ear and loads of motherly advice at every turn of the way. Thank you so much, ma'am. I thank the bossa, Dr. Kumbi Taiwo, Director of Academic Planning, Dr. Adewale, the University Librarian, Mr. Osani, Mr. Fatoki, the Deputy Vice Chancellors, Professor Molara Campbell, Professor Olushola Ladokun, as well as the Provost of the Postgraduate College, Professor Foluke Oluyemisi, for their support and regular advice. I wish to thank all the deans of the faculties in Leeds City University who always had a word of encouragement for me, making my work easier. Thank you so much. I also thank deans of other law faculties in other universities, like Caleb University, like Babcock University. They've been all very supportive as well. I wish to thank my colleagues in the Faculty of Law. You are indeed a great team to work with. I appreciate my students from the doctorate, LL.M, and undergraduate students. Your diligence in your research and making yourself available to be my research assistant is highly commendable, and I thank you all for this. I acknowledge and thank those who influenced my academic journey, beginning with Professor J.O.A. Akintayo, Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Ibadan, and past chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association Ibadan branch. Professor Yinka Omorodbe, SAN, former Dean of the Faculty of Law, UI, and former Attorney General of Oyo State. Professor Oluyemisi Abimbola, SAN, former Dean, Faculty of Law, UI, and presently the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research, Innovation, and Strategic Partnership of the University of Ibadan. And my PhD supervisor, Professor Nomthan Dozo Intlama, School of Law, University of Fort Hare, South Africa. Professor Intlama was more than a supervisor to me. She ensured that I finished writing my thesis in good time. In addition, my dear academic colleagues and supporters in my academic journey as well, Professor Bankole Shodipo, SAN, Professor Molade Olomola, Professor Babatunde Oni, SAN, Professor Tunji Oyelade, Professor Michael Adeleke, Professor Kolapo Omijire, Honorable Justice Professor Alero Akeredolu, Dr. David Eyongindi. I cannot forget your love and encouragement and assistance in reading manuscripts for me and giving me loads of ideas. I also appreciate the subtle support from eminent jurists who are also my friends and who never say no when I ask for favors. They are Honorable Justice Omolara Adiemi and Honorable Justice Bayo Taiwo of the High Court of Oyo State. I appreciate all the judges present here today. I have benefited in various ways from your wealth of knowledge and experience in the legal profession. I also want to thank all the professors of law, especially present here today. They have always been there for me. Thank you so much, and thank you for coming. I appreciate my professional mother and role model, Chief Foluke Oluyemisi SANCON, for all the loving support and advice. I cannot forget the support I received from the beginning when I started practicing law. And even as the chairperson of FIDA Oyo State, I wish to thank my dear senior sisters and friends, Mrs. Funsho Adebola, Mrs. Wura Ogunkeye, and Mrs. Fumi Roberts, who have supported me fully in all my professional endeavors, as well as in the domestic aspect. They all taught me work-life balance, as I learned from their living examples as accomplished and successful women at home and in their chosen career. I thank members of the International Federation of Women Lawyers Oyo State Branch, the Board of Directors, Mother and Girl Child Protection Initiative, ably led by Professor and Mrs. Malik. These organizations have given me a platform to continuously research on women and children's rights. I'm also grateful to my fellow co-laborers in God's Vineyard, the Rema Chapel Ministers' Wives Fellowship, and the Board of Ministers, Rema Chapel Bodija Ibadan, for their prayers and positive words urging me to fulfill my God-given purpose. I also thank the Nigerian Red Cross, Oyo State Branch. They also gave me a platform to become a leader. I was legal advisor for 10 years and also treasurer of the same organization. I appreciate the Nigerian Red Cross. I am also grateful to my fellow co-laborers. Okay, I've said that. I sincerely appreciate my dear siblings, Dr. Funsho and Dr. Mrs. Labo Desalu, Mr. Akinbayo and Mrs. Olufunlola Akinbolagun, Captain Adefolaju Desalu, Mr. Akin and Dr. Mrs. Debisi Olunloyo. Thank you all for your moral, spiritual, and emotional support throughout my journey in this life. Your love and support for me cannot be quantified. I also thank my siblings on my husband's side, Reverend Kingsley and Pastor Mrs. Bemisola Alfred, Mr. Tolu and Mrs. Shola Shodende, Mr. Femi and Mrs. Ronke Shodende. Thank you so much for believing in me and for your prayers and words of advice and encouragement. I acknowledge my parents, Professor Ayodele Babajide Desalu, popularly known as Professor A.B.O. Desalu, and late Mrs. Florence Olateju Desalu. Without their loving support, I probably would not have made it to where I am today. I appreciate you, Dad, for being a tremendous support in all my endeavors. Thank you so much, Daddy. I know my mom would have been the happiest woman today if she were here physically, because she was my greatest cheerleader. always encouraging me to put in more efforts in all that I do. May her gentle soul continue to rest in peace. I want to thank my children, Ayomikun, Oluwamayoko, and Oluwafikwayo. Thank you for all your prayers, helping me out with the house chores so that I can face my paper writings, cooking for me, and generally supporting me, always reminding me that I can make it. Thank you again, my God-fearing children. You shall all be celebrated in Jesus' name. Finally, I appreciate my husband and pastor, Foluke Abimbola SAN, FCAB, for his consistent and diligent support throughout our 27 years of marriage. Time will not permit me to talk about your generous, kind, and loving assistance, prayers, and desire to see me succeed at every point. He always took time to read whatever I asked him to read, ensuring that there were no mistakes. Thank you for making me shine. I also want to thank my childhood friends. They are here. I want to talk about Delayo Oriekun and so many others. Sorry, I cannot mention everybody's names. My uncles and my aunties, they're all here. I really appreciate you all. My professional colleagues, I wish I could mention all your names, but time and space will not permit me to do so. I thank you all for responding to my invitation and for all your support throughout the years. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Ma, for that lecture. We're going to take some pictures very quickly.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians old and proud to serve our sovereign motherland. Our flag shall be a symbol that truth and justice reigns. In peace or battle honored, and this we count as gain. To hang on to our children a banner without shame. O God of all creation, grant this our one request. university, the cradle of great leaders, where hopes and dreams are given life and drive for great attainment. With motivation and inspiration, we're dedicated, educated, standing peace and love. From different cultures, beautiful picture, Lead City University. We are the leaders, the light of our great nation, diversified yet one great vision, with knowledge for self-reliance and wisdom to serve our fatherland. We're dedicated, educated, standing peace and love. Our voices together, beautiful harmony. Lead City University. Lead City University. Lead City University.
Thank you very much. Please remain standing, ladies and gentlemen, as the procession files out in reverse order. Thank you all very much. We wish you a safe journey back to your destinations.
No, I thought it was in the other room. It's here.
Sure. Okay. Please. Okay. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please, we'd like you to just file out and take pictures with the inaugural lecturer. There's reception immediately after, right where you're seated. There will be reception immediately after, right where you're seated. So please, we are expected to take pictures with the inaugural lecturer just downstairs. Thank you very much.
Okay.